This is the third video in the module on basic data manipulation with our data frames. And so if you hopefully have watched the first two, and the basic objectives for the module are the same. We're looking at viewing and summarizing data sets. We're looking at element selection, column selection, row selection, and then some logical indexing. And so we did the majority of the element selection in video 1, column selection along with row selection and indexing in both videos. In this video, we're going to focus primarily on this logical indexing question. The data set we're going to use this time is from the Tidyverse. And so to get the data, I need to load the Tidyverse. And so we just load the library. And then I'm going to load the NYC Flights 13, and the data set that we actually want is the flights data set. You can ignore the next line because the Tidyverse stores the data as a tibble, which we will get to next week in class. We want to convert it to a good old-fashioned data frame, and so that's what I did right here. So now we have D flights. We can look at the structure of that, and you can see, let me make this a little bit bigger. It's a fairly big data set relative to the ones we've been looking at. There are 336,776 observations, and there are 19 variables associated with each row. And so this data set is flights into, I believe, into and out of New York City in 2013. So now we have this data set. Let's do some inquiry here. First thing I ask is, so how many flights were there in December? And so note, when we have this condition, we just have the month equals 12. So if you can, again, look at the data set here, let's see here. Let's see if I go back here and I just look at the data set, you can see month is just a numerical value. And so what I'm going to do is just say how many equal 12. And so if I just extract that value here and paste it in, of course what we get is a Boolean array, a Boolean vector I mean, with 335,776 records that equal for our vector. And then if I just sum those values, then I get 28,135 records. And so we didn't actually create a data frame here. We just counted the true values so that we could filter or so that we could apply this particular condition. So we've answered our first question about how many flights are in December. Suppose I want to know how many delta flights are in December. Well, the first thing I need to know is, what is a delta flight? How do I know what a delta flight is? So if I look at the data, we have a column called carrier, and you can see that each flight has a carrier variable. And so what I'd like to know is what corresponds to delta under the carriers. So oops, let me go back and grab that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to extract the unique carriers from our flight carriers column. So if we do that, we just do Control Enter. You can see that carriers is now created as a set of unique values. And so we can look at these values to decide which one is delta. Turns out this one, DL, is delta. And so our condition becomes carrier equal delta, month equal 12. So this is going to be all of the flights from December that have delta as a carrier. So if I just apply a mask, create that mask, you can see that we created the mask, which is 336,000. So again, one element in our mask for every row in the data set. These are Boolean values, true if this condition is met, that it's a delta and in December, false otherwise. And so we can just count the true values. So if I just use that same sum function, this tells me of the 28,135, 4,093 are actually delta. So next what I do is I say, well, let's grab those flights, right? So now we know there are 4,093 of them. I can just use that same masking function with the rows. And again, don't forget the trailing comma here. So we Control Enter to execute. And now we have the DL December, so the delta flights in December. And you can see that we have the same structure, so that we have the same 19 variables. These just happen to be all of the delta flights. You can down and look in the carrier column and the month of December. So that was pretty straightforward. Suppose we want to get the 2 Atlanta flights from that set. So I'm going to take the set that are from December and that I know are Delta, and now I want to continue filtering and get the ones that are to Atlanta. So now the question is, well, how do we know? Well, what does that mean to Atlanta? Again, go back and look at the data set, and you can see that we have the departure and arrival. So here's the origin and destination. The origin is where a plane leaves, destination is where it arrives. So this is what we want. We want the 2 Atlanta flights. So we're going to append the condition dest equal ATL. And so that's what we do right here in this mask. So we're saying DL December, $dest. So this extracts all of the destinations from our Delta dataset, our Delta December dataset, and then filters those to Atlanta, and we're going to call that new dataset ATL. And so ATL now has 946 observations. Note that we could have done this all in a single step. So I did this in multiple steps where I masked to get the Delta flights in December, and then from there extracted the ones to Atlanta. But I could have had just a more complex condition saying carrier equals Delta, flights month equals 12, and destination equals Atlanta, and then done the filtering in one step if that's what I wanted to do. So now that I have that, let's take a look at one more thing. Let's say how many total flights are going to Atlanta. So we know how many Delta flights are going to Atlanta. There are 946. If I want the total flights, then my mask simply removes that condition of the carrier being Delta. So now my mask is month equal December, destination equal Atlanta. So let's just go ahead and execute that, and then we can just count the values by summing the mask. And so we have 1,463. So of the 1,463 flights during December that went to Atlanta, 946 of those were on Delta. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to take our data set, our Atlanta data set, and we want the total departure delays of these flights. And so I want to just sum across this column. So the ATL is our Atlanta flights in December on Delta, and now I want to just sum the departure delays. So we execute that. Let's see, we execute that, Control Enter, and we get NA. And so again, NA is indicative of having missing values. So if I go to my ATL data set and then go over to departure delays, wherever that column is, departure delays, there's my arrival delay, time, hour, where's departure delay? There's departure delay. A whole bunch of negative values. I guess they got there early in some cases. And if you scroll down, somewhere we've got to be missing some data. I don't immediately see where we're missing the data. So since we can't immediately see it, let's go back and see if we can figure it out. So I have my ATL data set. Suppose I just look for NA values. So let's filter. Let's say we're going to take our ATL data set, and I want to filter on is NA ATL $ departure delay. There we go. Don't forget that trailing comma, and hit enter. And so these are the flights that have departure delay. There you go. Departure delays are NA'd on flight 80 or row 87,933 and so on. So I scrolled, and by hand I couldn't see them, but by searching for them, they're there. So that's what's messing up our calculation here, that when I try to sum, again, we get an NA. So we need to dump those. We need to get rid of the NA values. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the NA omit function like we did in the previous video. This time our data set is ATL, and the column is departure delays, and we're going to save that to dataset B. And now we have dataset B right here, which is our 941 observations. So it looks like we have 5 of the ATL records that have NA, and that corresponds to what we found when we did this manually. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. And so now we can sum across B, the new data frame B, because it doesn't have any NAs, and we see 12,643. I assume that's minutes. Or, as I show in the code, we could skip that intermediate step. So unless we particularly wanted this B data frame for something, we could use the omit. So in this case, in a omit, you see right here, returns a data frame, and so then we just augment that with the $ departure delay to say, give me the departure delay vector from this new data set, and then we just sum across those values, and so you see we get the same value. Okay, so that's what I wanted to do for this video module. Again, 3 different videos, and we focused on just the basics of interpreting the data sets and then doing some data manipulation and data filtering. We haven't done any grouping and aggregation and things like that. That's what we're going to focus on next time.